Labour's one-in, one-out returns deal with France was hailed as the plan that would finally turn the tide against the migrant crisis. But months on, the numbers tell a different story. When Sir Keir Starmer signed the agreement with France back in July, Downing Street claimed it would break the business model of the people smugglers. But since then, more than 15,000 migrants have crossed the Channel, while the UK has returned only 42. In a bid to stop migrants from making the perilous journey, the Home Office launched a deterrence campaign, warning that anyone who crossed the Channel illegally will be returned to France. GB News submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Home Office on September 9th, asking for further information on how much this campaign was costing the taxpayer and how many resources were distributed. The People's Channel can now reveal that the Home Office spent less than £15,000 on this campaign, equivalent to how much 3 asylum seekers would pay to people smugglers to help them make the perilous journey to Dover. Leaflets, posters, billboards and digital ads on YouTube and Facebook have all been used in the advertising blitz, appearing on would-be asylum seekers' accounts should they meet certain criteria, including location and demographics such as gender and nationality. One advert seen by the People's Channel shows a man being escorted onto a plane by officers in a high-vis jacket and reads in English and French, "You now face being detained and returned to France if you arrive in the UK on a small boat." Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says Labour's plan is failing on every front.
This so-called one-in, one-out deal is having no deterrent effect whatsoever. Since it was announced, well over 15,000 people have crossed the English Channel, yet only 42 have been sent back to France. Quite clearly, if you have an almost 100% chance of staying and pretty much a 1% chance or less than 1% chance of getting returned to France, that is not going to be a deterrent at all. And that is why the numbers are continuing to flood in, record numbers of illegal immigrants entering the United Kingdom. This year, so far, the first 9 months of this year have been the worst in history because Keir Starmer's first gimmick to smash the gangs didn't work, and now his second gimmick, this so-called one-in, one-out deal, isn't working either. And to compound that, analysis by GB News has uncovered the fact they've spent pretty much no money, a paltry £15,000 on advertising the returns programme. So it's no surprise at all that there is no deterrent effect whatsoever. What we need to do is quit the European Convention on Human Rights, and that will enable us to deport every single illegal immigrant within a week of arrival, either to their country of origin, if safe and if possible, or to a safe third country, for example, Rwanda, if not. That is the Conservative plan, but this government is too weak to do that. Frankly, spending any money advertising a deal which is not going to be a deterrent anyway is going to make no difference because the migrants are not foolish. They know 16,000 have crossed and only 42 have been returned. So they've got very, very good odds of staying in the UK. They're near certain to stay in the UK. And in fact, one of those 42 has actually come back already and has now concocted some kind of made-up modern slavery claim in an attempt to avoid removal back to France. So the government's deal has collapsed into farce already. It's not working, and they are too weak to do what is necessary, which is deport all illegal immigrants within a week of arrival.
Spending on physical printed material is understood to have cost the Home Office a mere £8,897. This was spent on 2,100 leaflets, printed in English, French, Arabic, Tigrinya, Pashto, Farsi, Somali, Vietnamese and Kurdish Sorani, and 90 physical posters in English and French. In addition, 114 printed billboards and 13 digital billboards have been used. But Tony Smith, former Director General of the UK Border Force, told GB News he doesn't believe migrants will even read the information provided by the physical campaign.
I've always said that the best way to stop the boats would be a returns agreement with France, if we could get one. We've never had one before, which would mean that everybody who arrived on our shores by a small boat would go instantly back to France. But the deal that's been struck is not that. The deal that's been struck is a one-in, one-out deal, which I don't think is going to be significant as a deterrent to prevent people from wanting to cross, because there's only quite a small chance that they're going to be selected to be one of the candidates to go back to France. And even if they are, it only results in a return to France and potentially an opportunity to try again another day. So I don't think it's really going to work unless we can get to a number that is a really, really significant number that matches or closely matches the numbers that are coming in already.
Smith agrees that seeing is believing, and that until people see migrants being detained and deported in large numbers, the smugglers' business model will survive.
So I'm not convinced that leaflet dropping in northern France is going to be effective because I'm not sure that very many people are going to read them or believe them. Seeing is believing. I do think they need to look at their communication strategy. We've seen evidence of this in the US and some evidence here that the cameras have been allowed to film people being put on planes. But I think they need a much more concerted effort if this is going to work, and that is to show people coming off boats, as we get pictures of now in Calais, and then being instantly detained and very quickly deported from the country. And those are the sorts of images that are more likely to have an impact upon the smugglers' business model than I think leaflet dropping in northern France.
Would you see that as sort of like a digital campaign, like on your phone, sort of on TikTok sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's important that we do use social media. In my experience, many of the migrants and certainly the smugglers do use social media channels. We've seen evidence of them advertising their services on things like TikTok. So they will be, I think, socially aware. And I think that what's really needed is a campaign to demonstrate that people are being detained and removed. The difficulty we have is that, as we know, people are not by and large being detained and removed. By and large, people are getting off boats and being admitted into the community potentially indefinitely while their asylum claims are heard. So I think the communication will only go so far, but you do need a significant policy change which demonstrates that this is happening in large number, and then communicate that out for this to have a really deterrent effect.
But what about an ad campaign for the digital age? Data collected on migrant arrivals shows around 76% coming across on small boats are adult men over the age of 18. To the date of GB News FOI request, digital adverts were shown 143,717 times and cost the Home Office just £5,795. At the Centre for Migration Control, Research Director Robert Bates believes the campaign isn't reaching the people it's supposed to.
The returns deal with France is a complete waste of time, quite frankly. It is the equivalent of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, because, of course, what it doesn't actually do is reduce the number of people that Britain is being burdened with. It, of course, swaps one illegal migrant that has come into the UK across the English Channel with another asylum seeker from France. So it does nothing to reduce the ever-escalating asylum and welfare bill that is accompanying this crisis. I also think we need to recognise that since it was announced, the numbers coming across the channel have not fallen. They are continuing at the same rate that they were last year, this time last year, and therefore you have to kind of make the conclusion that it is not a deterrent. And people are looking at the deal, they're looking at the really remote chance that they are the individuals selected to be returned to France and thinking, I still fancy my chances. In best case scenario, we will still see around about 50 people a week returned under this deal. That would still leave huge numbers of individuals coming across the channel, being put up in hotels, being put up in HMOs across the UK. So I think the whole strategy the government has adopted has effectively been get as many front pages in British newspapers that sadly are a bit too willing to lap up some of the narratives that they're being spun and effectively just create that cacophony from the British ecosystem. The problem is that they're not recognising that most of the individuals looking to make that crossing aren't getting their information from mainstream media. They're not actually getting their information about how to make this crossing from any official avenues. They're getting it from these Telegram groups. They're getting it from these WhatsApp groups, these individuals that are already in the UK telling individuals on the coast of France the life of Riley that awaits them if they are prepared to get into a dinghy. And unfortunately, this is what the Labour government is up against. They're up against a really devolved grassroots operation, and their talk of course, smashing the gangs really doesn't appreciate the fact that this is really a demand-led operation. This is not something that has just been conjured up by these people smugglers. It is something that is there because of the pull factors that are not being addressed in any way, shape or form. Well, there's very little money actually being spent, which I think in a way is indicative of the commitment from the government to actually making this a success. I think they know probably deep down that it is a bit of a fool's errand to keep going with this. But I really think this idea of kind of any means of cooperation with France, especially with this returns deal, is a complete waste of time. This is something where a simple policy of detaining anyone that comes into the country illegally, not putting them sort of free roam across communities in the UK, and then swiftly deporting them, giving them no sort of appeal rights, giving them no right to a judicial review or anything. And this, of course, requires a bit of strong arming of those countries of origin, which, quite frankly, they've gone nowhere near actually looking at, especially when it comes to places like Afghanistan. We're seeing now a real list of European countries that have been able to enter those returns processes with Afghanistan. The Labour Party aren't talking about that, nor are they actually talking about the third country deals. We've of course had Keir Starmer just today have really his nose put out of joint with this alleged summit with Balkans nations, where you've got the Prime Minister of Albania and you've got others in that area saying they don't want any part of a third deal. So the Labour Party came in, they tore up any of the work that had been done on tackling this crisis, and instead have resorted to gimmicks such as these advertising campaigns. And of course, when they announced that they were doing these advertising campaigns, they made a huge song and dance about it. They were really, really proud of themselves. They were, sort of blown away with their own intelligence as having come up with this idea. But again, as I said, none of this stuff will be filtering through. These people that are looking to make the crossing get their information from one source and one source only. That is the sort of individuals that are already here and the people smugglers.
Responding to the data, a Home Office spokesperson told GB News, "We will stop at nothing to break the business model of vile people smuggling gangs and to ensure migrants are not deceived by the lies. These adverts make clear that anyone entering the UK illegally by small boat risks being detained immediately and returned under the UK-France treaty." The GB News exclusive comes after we revealed the number of migrants arriving illegally by small boats has passed the total for the whole of last year. 220 migrants crossed around midday on October 22nd, bringing the total number of arrivals so far this year to 36,956. This figure is 70 higher than the 36,816 migrants who crossed the channel illegally during the whole of 2024. In a statement on the small boat crisis and the passing of the latest milestone, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood had this to say: "The previous government left our borders in crisis, and we are still living with the consequences. These figures are shameful. The British people deserve better. This government is taking action. We have detained and removed more than 35,000 who are here illegally. Our historic deal with the French means those who arrive on small boats are now being sent back. But it is clear we must go further and faster, removing more of those here illegally and stopping migrants from making small boat crossings in the first place. And I have been clear, I will do whatever it takes to restore order to our border." But as more and more migrants head for Britain's shores, the real question is, how does Britain stop the boats? Oliver Trapnell, GB News.